At this point, which civilization invented writing, even when writing was invented, has been lost to history. Most seem to attribute it to the Sumerians and somewhere in the 4th millennia BCE. But between the formal introduction of a writing system, which we will talk about next time, and the beginnings of true language, which we talked about last time, was something else. That something else was called Proto-Writing, which was basically just a series of symbols, something quite unlike anything that we would look at as an alphabet today. But when did this system truly begin? What makes it different than art? Is there a difference? Welcome to the history of writing. Proto-writing is best described as symbols used to convey ideas and information that don't have a direct linguistic equivalent. That is, proto-writing doesn't represent a sound. It doesn't represent a word. It represents an idea. For instance, we still use proto-writing today. Take a look at this. This doesn't actually represent a word. It doesn't even represent a sound. What it represents is an idea. In this case, stop. We as a culture have come to give significance to a red octagon, even if it doesn't have the word stop in it, to, again, stop our cars, stop walking, stop our motorcycles, what have you. If you don't believe me, what happens if I change the color? What happens if I change the shape? Do they mean anything? They don't really to me. Maybe they mean something to somebody. I don't know. And that's the thing with a lot of early proto-writing. We simply have no idea what any of it meant. We can guess, sure, but again, looking at that red octagon, if you were in a different society, in a different culture, in a different time, would you really have any idea that means to stop? What happens if another culture thinks a red light means go? To kind of exemplify this point, it's worth taking a look at cave paintings. Now, cave paintings could just be art. They really could. They're beautiful to look at. They liven up these cave rooms. You know, they're the kind of thing that you want to put up on your wall, I guess. But what is art, really? Art invokes a feeling, a thought, a memory, perhaps. So what if these cave paintings, like the ones at Cueva de los Manos, what if they were more than art? What if they were put there to convey information? What if they're part of some sort of initiation ritual or something like that? Could they have perhaps helped older members of a tribe remember information that should be passed down to the younger members of the tribe once they hit a certain age? Could they be such mnemonic devices? Perhaps. Whatever they actually mean, and I could be way off the mark on that, there is one agreed upon fact about proto-writing. Because proto-writing is designed to be easily understood by the entirety of a culture, unlike current writing, it doesn't actually have an effect on a culture. Rather, it reflects a culture. Let me explain. Taking the hunting example a little bit further, it's likely each clan, each tribe had its own name, its own identity. Perhaps they followed a particular animal, an elk, deer, buffalo, what have you, and those were the animals that they associated themselves with. Maybe they drew pictures of those animals as part of the ritual I already noted. Those pictures then could have become carvings, and eventually symbols for the tribe. They became the elk tribe, the deer tribe, the buffalo tribe. Now, keep in mind, that kind of assignation of a symbol to a group was widespread at the peak of proto-writing. And while we're far beyond that peak now, we still continue that pattern. But remember, proto-writing's peak was long before what we would ever think of as writing came into existence. So while symbols reminiscent of modern day writing have appeared, and we have found them in such places as Chinese dig sites, they're not necessarily direct predecessors. And that's because proto-writing was before modern writing, obviously, but writing didn't necessarily evolve from it. Yet it is intriguing when we find such artifacts as the ones we have dug up from the Dawenku culture, for instance, which I really hope I'm saying correctly. The Dawenku culture dates back some 5,000 years or so, and it's thought to be the direct predecessor of the Longshan culture, which is, again, thought to be a direct predecessor of the Shang culture, which is where the first true Chinese script appeared. And the Dawenku proto-writing samples that have been found do resemble modern-day Chinese. This could be a sun above water or maybe a cloud, and it bears a striking resemblance to the Chinese character for dawn. It's probably a coincidence, but it is possible that one eventually led to the other. There have been many examples of proto-writing in China, actually. Some are carved, drawn, or painted on pottery or turtle shells. Others have shown up on pieces of bone or jade. Examples from Jiahu, for instance, in the basin of the Yellow River, show 16 distinct symbols, which could have just been more tribal signs, but they're still kind of hotly debated because there have only been a small number of examples found. Could have been something completely different. Again, it's really hard to tell when we don't have an abundance of examples and we don't have that modern day through line. But then you can look at Damighty, which I don't care if I'm saying wrong because it has a really friggin' cool name. And it means big wheat field, just in case you were wondering. But at Damighty, there are 3,172 cliff carvings dating back some 8,000 years and covering a whopping 15 kilometers. I don't know how many miles that is, but it sounds like a lot. They feature environmental and social themes, the sun and the moon, people hunting, herding, and fighting, and even some godlike beings. And what's interesting about the proto-writing at Damighty, though, is that there are a number of characters that repeat across the carvings. Perhaps some kind of proto-alphabet? Frankly, we don't know, and we'll probably never know for certain. Europe had writing too, just in case you're thinking I'm solely focusing on Asia. But, like with most of history, Europe was a bit lacking. Simple symbols only seem to have started to appear around the 7th millennium BCE, some 9,000 years ago. These Vinca symbols, as they were known, became more and more complex until we hit the Tartaria tablets, which some people like to think of as ancient text equivalents. Maybe more like emojis. I don't know. Like every other piece of proto-writing that I've talked about so far, we have absolutely no idea what they meant. We also don't know what the so-called Indus script symbols mean. No clue. Absolutely lost in history. But there were similar symbol systems we do understand, like the proto-cuneiform script of Sumer from about 3500 BC. By the end of that millennium, it started to be used to keep accounts, something of a numerical cataloging system, and was soon paired with pictures. But we'll talk more about that and Sumer next time. Then, of course, we have hieroglyphics, which, again, we probably would never have been able to decipher if it weren't for a particular thing that we will talk about in another video because it's one of the coolest pieces of artifacts of language that I know of, and I really want to talk about it, but that's for a future video. But what's interesting about hieroglyphs is that they were developed probably after the Sumerian script. We don't have a smoking gun that says hieroglyphs were directly influenced by the Sumerian script, but it is possible given their geographic locations. They are very close together. Of course, they could have developed separately, but with the cultural exchange that was going on at the time, there is a chance that there was some influence, to say the least. Now again, we have no clue when writing actually emerged. I mean, when you go from one system of symbols to another system of symbols, or even use those same symbols and just use them in a different way, it's hard to see where one thing changed into the other. It's kind of like when you go back and you read Shakespeare. The words are all generally the same, but the language is completely different. I know a lot of people that can't read Shakespeare for the life of them, but it's the same language. It's the same thing with proto-writing versus writing. One transitioned into the other. But it really doesn't matter because, as I said at the top of this video, proto-writing didn't really disappear. It's still here. It's still around us. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the pockets of civilization where writing started to develop, they were somewhat isolated. Now, again, they were traveling, they were trading long distances, but most examples just have it where Europe was trading within Europe, Asia was trading within Asia, the Middle East was trading within the Middle East. The Silk Road wouldn't be around for another 1,000 years or so. So there wasn't this big interconnection going on to merge all of the scripts together to bring about these huge cultural changes. But even once they were connected, proto-writing didn't die out. As I said, we still use it. We still got these stop signs. We still have these symbols. Stop lights, yield signs. You know, there's a lot of, most driving signs are forms of proto-writing. But there have been other cultures who continued to use proto-writing exclusively until only recently. The proto-writing of the Incas, for example, is still widely used until the 1500s. Quipu, also known as talking knots, were basically recording devices that used colored, spun, and plied thread or strings. They could have just a few knots or up to a few thousand, and could be used to denote all sorts of things. They could be used for histories, they could be used for accounts, they could be used for simple communications between one villager and another. Note similar systems were used in both Hawaii and China, so it's likely there was a bit of a cultural exchange going on there at one point or another. There's another story from the turn of the 20th century of a man named Uyakak, who invented his own form of pictograph writing for his dialect, Yugtun, which had never had a formal written form. Now, he became inspired to do this after he heard people reading from the Bible in English, and he was fascinated by this. And you can read up more on this. I'm just going to give you a brief overview, but it absolutely one of the coolest things. He eventually evolved the proto-writing that he developed into a new formal writing system. So it must have been really cool to see this cultural evolution happening right before your eyes. Literally hundreds of years of evolution within the span of a decade. Cool stuff, right? Last example of proto-writing we're going to talk about today, because I know this video is going a little bit long and I don't want to bog your day down, comes from Eastern Nigeria. And we're talking about it last because it's still in use today. No, this isn't more stop signs, don't worry. It's called Nsibidi, and it's several centuries old and uses several thousand symbols. The coolest thing about Nsibidi, I think, is that there are originally two versions, a secret, sacred version and a public, more decorative version. But thanks to colonization and our so-called Western influence, use rapidly declined, and the system is now generally only used by the Ekpe secret society, which there's a whole lot of conflicting information on. I'd recommend reading up on them. They're extremely fascinating, and within their region, extremely powerful. These aren't the Elks, these aren't the Shriners. This is a version of the Illuminati, but they actually exist. And they mean business. But they're not as powerful as a red octagon. And that, my friends, is proto-writing in a nutshell. Obviously, there's really nowhere to go further except into writing, which we're going to talk about in the very next History of Writing video. We're also going to talk about why beer is so pivotal to its existence. It's going to be a fun one. Now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it. Please go to your rooftop and scream as loud as you can how amazingly awesome it is. You don't have to do that. You can just like the video. Or maybe give a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're feeling really rambunctious, head on over to patreon.com/drunkonwriting and help me create even more awesome videos. Thank you in advance. Thank you to my current Patreon supporters. And until next time, keep on writing.